Welcome. Today I'm going to show you how I create an Animate Stream Deck button for use in live streams. It's quite a laborious process and this is going to be a long form video, so let's dive right in. When looking at regular buttons for video switching and other equipment, they tend to be quite basic. It's a high contrast word on a very plain button. The button might change color from green to red, depending on whether it's in use. Let's try and keep that format the same so that we can still read the button and have a simple icon that denotes what the button does. Today we're going to put together a button for a lower third. We already have our lower third design, which is right here. Let me just show you a preview of the animation. So I want a button that animates or that activates this lower third animation. I want the button to be quickly identified as this is what it does, but also I need a word on there to say what lower third it is. There might be a couple of different lower thirds in the live stream, and I want to make sure that each one is quickly and easily identified. I also want the button to animate when the animation takes place and stop animating when the animation stops. It's a predetermined time. If I click preview here, you can see that the lower third animates, it stays up for a little bit of time, and then it disappears. So that's the first button that I want to make a generic icon for that I can then individually name. The second button I want to animate today is for a bug, the click here action button, or the click here action lower third. So again, it pops up, does its animation, and eventually goes away. Both of these are quite simple, but I need to easily be able to look at the Stream Deck, identify which button I'm about to push without taking up too much time thinking about it. Today I'm using Adobe Flash to create the graphics for this animation. It's not a prerequisite, it's just something that I'm comfortable working with. Let's name our layers and get a guide set up. For Stream Deck buttons, size doesn't really matter, although smaller makes it a lot easier to animate. Having an entire Stream Deck filled with 1080p GIFs or JPEGs tends to bog it down a lot more than just having them at 64 or 32. That should be a good guide for the button itself. Now let's put in some guides for the text boxes. There's 3 positions that text can go on a Stream Deck button: bottom, middle, and top. So let's put some placeholders in, or some guidelines in, for where those will sit, roughly. That should cover the 3 places that you can place text on a Stream Deck button. I use a generic background for all the Stream Deck buttons that I have, sort of a theme to them all, which is just a simple square with the corner cut out of it. So let's put that together now. It does mean that I can't use the top spacing for the words on the button, but that's okay. It still gives me 2 spaces. That's the default done. Now, we already have our design for our lower thirds. So let's copy this as the icon. So hexagon shape, lower bit, and a bit of a circle for the logo. Let's make up a generic version of this. Let's also change the color of the pen so I can see what I'm doing on a different layer. It's looking a bit thick. Let's thin it down. But it still has to be an icon. It still has to be recognizable pretty quickly as an icon. It has to be very basic. Not to be too complicated at all. We're just going to use a silhouette, essentially a silhouette of the design that we've got for the lower third. Also make these templates. Oops. These template shapes just in case I need to reuse them. Let's go back and have a look at our example graphic. So there is another polygon that's just a bit bigger. That's there. Let's get rid of the in-betweens. By removing the in-betweens, it gives us a better idea of what this graphic is going to look like, representative of what we're trying to achieve. It's looking a bit plain. Oops. Let's put a placeholder in, or something in representing the logo, the circle for the logo, and how much room we got. Let's shorten this. That didn't work. Let's shorten that and just put a representation of that last shape. That sits up there. Like that. Okay, I think we got all the elements we need. Alright, let's go and put this whole thing together. Then let's copy and paste that and give it a border. And we'll change the color of this so it doesn't conflict. I'll try that over there. It's a bit big. Like that. There, and we'll again convert it and paint it. All right, there's an icon representing our lower third. If we take the guidelines on it, it's looking a bit bland, and there's a lot of space in the bottom because it's a lower third, but not a lot of space up top. So I think we need something else that's just going to fill out the big area. I can just imagine, and if we do a test and we put a word in here, as an example, it doesn't quite work. The lower third is down at the bottom of the icon, and it doesn't have much of a graphical influence. It just looks like an accent. And then the word just dominates the entire tile. So as a button, when you're looking at it from a small point of view, even though it works, it doesn't denote that this is for a lower third. It just looks like a simple graphic with a big word on top of it. So I think it needs something else. What we're going to do is put a representative in of a video screenshot with a lower third. I think that might be a better solution. So usually a video will have a talking head like I've got right now. Let's put a simile in for a talking head to make our button represent a screenshot of a video. Shoulder, this looks a bit weird. Is it better? I think as an icon that looks a lot better. Having the face there makes it seem like it's a video screenshot and it's got a lower third down the bottom. I might keep the face outlined rather than doing it as a solid, which should mean that when we put the text back in, it doesn't dominate or interrupt the contrast. It's a basic representation of what a video screenshot would look like, with the dominant feature or the biggest, boldest element being the lower third part. I think that's a good representation of a lower third as far as a simple icon goes. Adding text over the top might make it a bit messy. We'll see how that looks once we get it into the Stream Deck. There might be an outline around the text which might help it. We can always come back and change it later on. We can remove the head or change the icon down the bottom. But for now, we're just going to leave it. Let's now change this to the next part, which is the action bug. So the head's going to stay the same. We're just going to change the lower part. We're going to change it nice and simply. All we need to do is just make this shorter. That's what the difference between the full lower third and the action bug. It's just its length of the icon, or the length of the design. So let's change the length of the icon. And nice and simple, let's just cut the middle out of it. And we're done, nice and simple. Same basic representation, but it's shorter. I think if you change the colors of the buttons, it'll then distinguish between this is an action icon and this is a lower third icon. Next, we just need the elements that we're going to animate. In the animation, the lower third comes across the screen. So I think we're just going to represent that as the animation default. I want it to loop when it's animating and change color. The idea is that the button goes from whatever color it is to a green color to show that it's been active. And then the simple motion of the button will help distinguish, when you look down at the Stream Deck very quickly, it'll help distinguish that this button is currently active. Don't push any other buttons. So we just need a chevron is what I'm going to use. So make a simple chevron shape that flashes across the screen. I think that's the simplest way to animate this thing. All right, the chevron shape is all we need. Let's get all these elements exported so that we can put them into Photoshop. Need to make sure that each element has its own separate color so that when we export it, they're all different elements, but they're still all combined. So everything that you want to be as one piece, as a compound object, needs to be the same color. Everything that's separated needs to be a separate color. We'll open up Illustrator and we'll open up Photoshop. As the Stream Deck buttons are only small, having a big image is sort of redundant because most of the pixels will be hidden anyway. Let's start with a smallish size, but still enough pixels to be able to see the icon without having it blocky or pixelated. So in Illustrator, I've got my export. Let's just copy and paste these elements across one by one. So Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and we want it as a shape layer. And because our color is gray, it's not really visible. So let's change these. All right, number one. Let's do this for all of the individual elements. Each one, again, just copying and pasting to a separate layer, much like they are in Illustrator. Cool. Close that down. And with that saved, we can close this down too. Now we just concentrate on the last step, which is in Photoshop. So first of all, let's scale all our elements to fit the square that we want to fit. So you can see here that there's quite a bit of pixelation going on within these elements, but when I scale them down to their proper size, those pixelations go away and it's still quite clear as to what each element is. We need to pick a generic color for all lower third icons, and I think the pink will do for now. Let's just make the background black so it's easy to see. All right, now the question is, do we make the icon the same color as that? So that everything in there is the same. Do you know what? Let's make this darker. Oh, actually, let's make this transparent. Having the head transparent means that it won't show up as easily and the text over the top will be more contrasted, but it's still there. We're just got to find the right opacity level so that it's not completely disappeared when we shrink this button down to the size that it is on the Stream Deck. Right, so there's our off states for both of those buttons. Now we just need to create the animations for them. We can duplicate the group so we don't influence that, and I'll call that on. Right, so now that these are on states, let's change their colors to a nice green. So we can definitely see that they're on. we've got all our elements ready. Let's just animate them. So the one thing I want to do is have this chevron scroll across the screen. So I'm going to create a layer for every keyframe. And I'm putting a chevron down the bottom so that it doesn't interrupt the word. So if the word is still there, it's not going to be overrun by the animation, making it difficult to see. I still want to be able to see what lower third and what action is being triggered. So we don't need those anymore. Turn this off. There's our first frame. Just wondering whether I should make that green a bit different, and I think I will, just to help distinguish it. The difficulty with doing keyframes is that you've got to change each one individually. As it turns out, we're just going to do 3 different states. So an on for generic lower third / action, and then the 2 off states for each one. With all the animation layers ready to go, it's time to add them to the timeline. I'm going to use a keyframe for this. We can do tween animations in Photoshop, but I'm old school and I like keyframes, especially when you're running it at, say, 15 frames a second for the GIF animation. It's not worth trying to do anything overly excessive. We've essentially got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 frames of animation. So it's really not that difficult. Now, unfortunately, the Stream Deck doesn't let you temporarily change the image while something is running. The idea behind this is that you push the button, the animation will happen, and I need the Stream Deck, or I'd like the Stream Deck to show me that there is something in progress and then go back to the static image. Because the Stream Deck struggles to do this, instead what I'm doing is I am copying the animation, I think 11 times, so that it loops and then it will stay on a static image. You can see on the bottom of the screen on the timeline that it's only going to play through once. So after copying it for the times that we need to, or that I'd like it to be, the last stage is to just copy the last frame again and then make it the static image, and that's the image that it will finish on. So we select save for web and we can preview it. You can see in the preview that the animation plays very, very fast. Photoshop doesn't have a clock speed, so it plays at the maximum CPU rate. However, when you actually play this back on a PC, it'll play at roughly 15 to 20 frames a second. On the Stream Deck, it plays even slower than that. So it's very hard to gauge what the animation actually looks like until you export it and open it up in a picture viewer. Just going to name it something that makes sense, and also something that can be expanded upon when more icons are created for these live stream events. I'm naming it Auto On because it automatically plays the on animation and then stays. This may seem a bit backwards, but it works when it's on the Stream Deck. Now for this, for the action or the shorter bug type lower third, I thought it might be wise to change the colors just a touch to quickly identify, without having to read what it is, that this isn't a title. This is more of an action or a call to action. Again, we save for web and try and keep the same naming convention when more of these are created. The frames are exactly the same because the play animation doesn't have anything different, or the looping animation doesn't have anything different. It's only the final frame that matters. Copying this animation 11 times is a guesstimate. The PowerPoint animation lasts for about 6-7 seconds, and the 80 so frames should also last for that time. If the looping animation goes for a bit longer than the PowerPoint animation, that's fine. It gives me a good indication that I shouldn't be pressing anything anyway. It's only if it goes shorter than, and I accidentally hit another key while the PowerPoint is still animating, in which case the viewer will see a jump in on-screen graphics. Now that the file is exported, I can open it in Picture Viewer, and you can see the animation is playing at a slower rate within Windows than it did within Photoshop. The clock speeds and the way that they calculate frames on GIFs is different. So now we're into the Stream Deck software. I'm just going to open it up and we're going to create our buttons to get this started. So for this, we need to have a multi-action, except both sides of this are the same action. The multi-action lets you switch between 2 images. However, because ours is a timed image and we want it flicked back, it'll essentially perform the same action every single time that you push it, and it'll just be a visual cue rather than a technical wait or a technical delay that stops me from pressing the button. So I open up PowerPoint and we can see that the frame beforehand is automated and it transitions instantly. So for this to work and to go back to that, the way that PowerPoint works is that we go to the frame that's beforehand, and then that instantly jumps to the frame with the animation, and then the animation disappears and is left with a blank screen, but doesn't change. So in this case, we want frame 5, so we jump into frame 4. When you press a number key plus enter while running a PowerPoint presentation, it'll jump to that frame. This also works with double digits. If you want frame 12, you can hit 1, 2, enter very quickly, and it'll jump to frame 12. Also for this, the multi-action switch for image on frame 1 and image on frame 2, or state 1 and state 2, they need to be uploaded. Even though it looks like in the software that it will keep the same image, it won't actually replay the animation when it switches states unless you've specified a different image for the different state. I'll address this shortly. Firstly, we're just going to check what frame we need for the next animation, and this time it's frame 6. So we're going to add another hotkey for 6 and another hotkey for enter, and that's one action. And then we're going to switch over to the second state and add the same things again. It's going to add in the custom image or the custom GIF that we've just created. And you can see when I switch between state 1 and state 2 that it's sort of grayed out. It means that it won't replay the image. It won't start the GIF animation again. Right, so because state 2 doesn't play the GIF file from start, it just stays on the current frame, we're having to add the same image twice. So this is for the lower third. Sorry, this one's for the lower action, and now this one's for the lower third. Because the starting frames are the same, it's important that you name your files correctly, or that we name our files correctly. Now it's time to test again. So we'll boot up into the slideshow. It boots up into frame 1, and frame 1 doesn't do anything. And we push the button on the Stream Deck and it jumps to the right slide. You can briefly see that it goes to the slide beforehand and then instantly transitions to the next slide. That slide has the animation. When the animation finishes, it's a black screen. The GIF animation is almost perfectly timed that when the on-screen animation finishes, that the GIF animation also finishes. And we're just testing a repeatability. Can we push the same button twice and get the same pop-up? Does the frames reset after the animation is finished playing? So on the Stream Deck, you can't see whether it's state 1 or state 2, and it doesn't really matter. They both perform the same action. So that's it. This has actually worked really, really nicely. It's a good visual indicator that something is playing and I shouldn't be touching other buttons until that animation stops. So thanks for joining in. I hope this has given you some information about how to program or how to set up your Stream Deck and the animations for it for doing something similar. There's no native behavior to push a button on a Stream Deck, have it wait an amount of seconds and then go back to that first state of the button. This is the best way I've found to do it without having to program an own app or to install custom plugins. So that's it. The Stream Deck works. All the buttons work the way that I wanted it to. Thank you for sticking around to the end, and make sure to click that like button if you found this video helpful.